Welcome to the deep dive. We're really thrilled you are joining us today because the topic on the table is one that affects virtually every single person listening.
Right, either directly or indirectly.
Exactly. Yet it remains one of the most heavily guarded, hidden, and frankly misunderstood phenomena of the modern digital age.
It really is.
I mean, think about the screen you are looking at right now, or the phone sitting in your pocket. We carry these portals everywhere, and they have fundamentally rewired how we experience connection.
They absolutely have.
Today, we are looking at a comprehensive 2024 report by the BARNA Group, which was produced in partnership with Pure Desire Ministries. The report is called Beyond the Porn Phenomenon.
And it is a massive piece of research.
It is. Our mission for this deep dive is to look past the cultural noise and dig into the hard sociological data, the neuroscience of the habit, and the profound relational impacts it causes.
We really want to get into the mechanics of it all.
Yeah. We are going to explore the psychological hook of explicit content, look closely at a devastating reality known as betrayal trauma, and, most importantly, we are going to extract the incredibly practical, step-by-step strategies for recovery and healing outlined by the experts in this text.
That recovery aspect is so crucial.
Right. And before we jump in, I do want to offer a quick disclaimer. We are unpacking data from practicing Christians, pastors, and faith-based recovery experts. The source material does come from a faith-based perspective.
Yes, it focuses heavily on the Christian church's response to this issue.
But we are doing this to understand the human behavior, the science, and the actionable solutions. We are going to impartially report the sociological data and psychological explanations provided in the text without taking sides or endorsing specific religious viewpoints.
Our goal is to convey the clinical and behavioral insights from the authors.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. Because the scale of the shift in our digital landscape is almost hard to comprehend.
It really is a completely different world now.
We are no longer living in a world where explicit material is something you have to actively seek out in a physical location. You don't have to deal with the social friction of walking into a store anymore.
Right, the physical barrier to entry is completely gone.
We are talking about a universe of algorithmic, perfectly tailored content that is quite literally a thumb swipe away at any hour of the day or night.
The ubiquity of access is the foundational shift in this entire phenomenon. When we analyze this material, what's fascinating here is the stark contrast between how pervasive this is in our daily lives and how rarely it is discussed with any real scientific rigor.
It's the elephant in the digital room.
Exactly. The BARNA report points out that smartphones now consume well over half of the average person's total online time. We're constantly connected.
Right.
To illustrate the magnitude of what that means for this specific industry, the data reveals that the top 3 adult sites in the United States receive more annual web traffic than Netflix, Amazon, Pinterest, LinkedIn, and TikTok combined.
That statistic is genuinely difficult to wrap your head around. I mean, think about every single person you saw today scrolling through TikTok.
Millions of people.
Or ordering something on Amazon, or unwinding with Netflix. You take all of that immense web traffic, you combine it, and it still doesn't eclipse the demand for explicit content.
It paints a picture of a society that is consuming this on a massive industrial scale.
It really does. And the demographics driving that traffic are changing just as rapidly as the technology itself.
The shifting demographics are one of the most revealing aspects of the 2024 data. If we look back even a decade ago, pornography was culturally and statistically viewed as a predominantly male issue.
Right, that was the standard assumption.
But the current data shows that while men still make up the majority of consumers, with 78% of men reporting porn use, the gender gap is narrowing significantly.
It's closing fast.
Today, 44% of women report using pornography, which is a noticeable jump from 39% back in 2015.
So what is driving that specific shift among women? I mean, is it just that the cultural stigma is eroding so people are more honest on surveys? Or is there a change in the content itself?
The experts analyzing this data suggest it's a combination of several factors. The easing of social stigma certainly plays a role in self-reporting. People are just more willing to admit it now.
That makes sense.
But there is also a very deliberate shift within the industry. Content creators and platforms have begun specifically targeting female demographics. They are creating material that appeals to different psychological or narrative preferences.
They are broadening their market.
Exactly. Furthermore, as smartphones have become the primary delivery device, The extreme privacy of consumption has removed many of the traditional barriers that might have previously deterred female users.
You don't have to share a family computer in the living room anymore.
Right, you have a private, high-definition screen in your pocket at all times.
Yeah. And that extreme privacy also seems to be heavily influencing younger generations. The report breaks down the frequency of use by age, and the numbers for young adults are staggering.
The generational shift is massive.
We are looking at 39% of Gen Z and 36% of millennials viewing explicit content on a daily or weekly basis.
Daily or weekly, let that sink in.
That means for well over a third of young adults, this isn't an occasional curiosity. It is a baked-in, regular part of their weekly routine.
And that routine usage transcends boundaries that you might assume would act as a deterrent. This is where the BARNA data presents a striking paradox regarding religious communities.
This part of the report was really eye-opening.
You might hypothesize that regular participation in a faith community, along with professed religious beliefs emphasizing traditional sexual ethics, would severely curtail this behavior.
You would think it would be a massive buffer.
But the gap between practicing Christians and non-Christians is remarkably narrow. The report shows that 54% of practicing Christians view porn. Oh, yes. When you break that down by gender within the church, it is 75% of Christian men and 40% of Christian women. Wow. Compare that overall 54% to 68% of non-Christians, and you realize the behavioral difference is actually very marginal.
It really shatters the illusion that holding a specific set of moral beliefs somehow inoculates you against the pull of a digital algorithm.
Belief alone is not enough to fight human neurobiology.
And the report goes even further up the leadership chain. It highlights a statistic about pastors that is incredibly sobering. 67% of U.S. pastors report a personal history of porn use.
And the current usage numbers are just as concerning.
Right, with 18%, nearly 1 in 5 saying it is an active current struggle.
Okay.
If the people who are literally writing the sermons and leading the conversations are getting hooked, it proves this is fundamentally a hardware issue in the human brain.
It is not just a matter of moral failing or a lack of religious conviction. It speaks volumes about the potency of the medium. When the leaders and the congregants are struggling at nearly the same rates as the general public, it highlights that we are dealing with a neurobiological phenomenon that completely bypasses cognitive belief systems.
The brain's reward center just takes over.
It does. Which brings us to a crucial concept detailed in the report. They call it the desensitization paradox.
This is fascinating.
As this high-speed, high-definition access has become normalized, the very definition of what the human brain registers as pornography has fundamentally shifted.
The baseline has moved completely. The report asks people to define what they actually consider to be pornography, and the shift over the last decade is wild.
The numbers reflect a huge cultural change.
In 2015, 79% of people surveyed agreed that an image of sexual intercourse was definitely porn. By 2024, that number dropped to 67%.
So a significant drop in what people consider explicit.
Right, so fewer people are looking at overtly explicit material and calling it porn. But simultaneously, more people today are classifying non-explicit, fully nude, or even just partially nude images as pornography.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, neuroscience explains the mechanics of this shift perfectly. The human brain is evolutionarily wired to crave novelty.
We are built to look for new things.
Yes. Whenever we encounter something new, especially something related to survival or reproduction, the brain releases a surge of dopamine to reward us and encourage us to investigate further.
It is the brain's way of saying, hey, pay attention to this. This is important.
Exactly. However, digital pornography acts as a superstimuli. It overloads the brain's reward system with a volume and variety of imagery that natural human experiences simply cannot compete with.
It's like the difference between eating an apple and drinking a massive energy drink loaded with refined sugar.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
The apple has natural sugars your body knows how to process. The energy drink floods your system so intensely that your taste buds get blown out. And suddenly, an apple doesn't even taste sweet anymore. You need more and more refined sugar just to register the taste.
That is a highly accurate analogy. Because the brain is being constantly bombarded with this superstimuli, it adapts. It literally downregulates its dopamine receptors to handle the flood, which means it quickly builds a tolerance.
So you need a stronger dose to feel the same effect.
Precisely. To meet that insatiable evolutionary demand for novelty and to achieve that same initial dopamine hit, the user must seek out content that is increasingly novel, deviant, hardcore or taboo.
Which explains the survey data.
That was exactly why fewer people classify simple intercourse as porn today. Their neurological baseline has shifted. They have been desensitized because they are regularly encountering much more extreme imagery.
And consequently, the cultural lines between what is meant for arousal, what is considered art, and what is just a sexualized image in advertising are becoming completely blurred for the average consumer.
Everything gets flattened out into this constant hum of sexualized content.
And when you look at the motivations, when the researchers actually ask people why they're clicking in the first place, the answers reveal so much about what is happening beneath the surface.
The seated motivations are incredibly telling.
Personal arousal is the top reason, at 56%. But the secondary motivations point to some profound emotional realities. 30% of men and 16% of women say they use it simply out of boredom.
Just trying to fill empty time.
Right. Others cite dealing with stress, navigating anxiety, or dealing with loneliness. It frames the screen as a kind of digital pacifier.
It functions as a highly accessible coping mechanism. And understanding that it is a coping mechanism is the essential bridge to understanding the neuroscience and the psychology of the addiction itself.
It is not just about a high sex drive.
Not at all. The BARNA report features extensive insights from Dr. Shuri Keffer, a licensed marriage and family therapist. She breaks down the exact biological mechanics of what happens inside the skull when a person engages with this material.
Her explanation of the brain's chemical cocktail is fascinating. She describes the human brain as a super biocomputer. It operates with roughly 86 billion neurons and 100 trillion connections.
It is incredibly complex.
When someone views explicit content, the brain doesn't just release one isolated chemical, it unleashes a massive coordinated flood. You get norepinephrine, which acts as the body's adrenaline.
That provides the physical rush.
Then you get dopamine, the primary feel-good neurotransmitter that reinforces the behavior. But then you also get vasopressin and oxytocin.
And those two are crucial.
They really are. They're the specific hormones responsible for long-term memory formation and human bonding. And finally, you get a rush of endorphins, which act as natural pain relievers and pleasure enhancers.
When you look at that list of chemicals, you realize the magnitude of what is happening.
Right.
This is an incredibly powerful neurochemical cocktail.
It is overwhelming the system.
The brain is essentially taking the exact biological systems that were evolutionarily designed to facilitate deep human bonding, pair bonding, and relational intimacy. And it is redirecting all of that potent chemistry toward a glowing piece of glass.
That is such a tragic way to frame it, but it is true.
The report highlights a profound linguistic insight to illustrate this. The ancient Hebrew word for lust is ava, and its literal translation is the strong nail that hooks you to itself.
The strong nail that hooks you.
From a purely clinical, scientific perspective, that ancient definition is perfectly accurate. The brain is being physically, chemically hooked to the stimulus.
If you think about how often we use our devices just to numb out, maybe you scroll through a social media feed when you are stressed about an email from your boss.
Or you play a mobile game to ignore a problem.
Right, or you binge a television show to forget a fight you had with a friend. We all use screens for emotional regulation, but for someone using explicit content, it is that same underlying impulse, except the stakes and the neurochemical hooks are exponentially heavier.
The payload is much bigger.
Dr. Keffer points out that chronic use is very rarely just about sex. These individuals are often actively self-medicating.
That is the most critical psychological insight for anyone trying to understand why this behavior is so difficult to stop. The text explains that a significant percentage of individuals who struggle with compulsive use are carrying underlying post-traumatic stress.
They're carrying ghosts from their past.
Exactly. This trauma could stem from a variety of sources. It could be childhood neglect, emotional or physical abuse, or even early unwanted exposure to pornography itself at a young age, which is its own form of trauma.
Getting exposed to hardcore content at age 9 or 10 damages the developing brain.
It creates deep neural pathways. The explicit content becomes a highly effective, deeply ingrained coping mechanism. It is used to numb heartache, quiet anxiety, and deaden painful memories.
It works in the short term.
It does. But the tragedy is that over time, the intense shame surrounding the behavior compounds the original trauma, creating an escalating vicious cycle.
The toll that cycle takes on a person's mental health is devastating. The report contrasts the general well-being of daily users against those who don't use it, and the data paints a very dark picture.
The correlation with poor mental health is undeniable.
Daily users are significantly more likely to report feeling heavily self-critical. 58% of daily users struggle with this, compared to 42% of non-frequent users.
They are constantly tearing themselves down.
They report higher levels of anxiety regarding everyday decisions, a pervasive fear of failure, feelings of being easily overwhelmed, and significantly higher rates of clinical depression.
The most alarming statistic regarding the mental health impact is the existential toll it takes. 21% of daily porn users report that they always or usually feel that life isn't worth living.
That is a heartbreaking number, over 1 in 5.
When you compare that to just 6% of non-users, you see a profound indicator of the despair, the shame, and the deep emotional isolation that accompanies compulsive use.
It is a totally hidden epidemic of despair.
This data completely shatters the prevalent cultural narrative that this is merely a harmless, victimless form of modern entertainment.
It is the furthest thing from victimless. And the damage does not stay contained to the individual user. It ripples outward into their most intimate connections, which brings us to the relational impact.
This is where the collateral damage really becomes visible.
The BARNA data reveals a massive, frankly shocking blind spot in relationships regarding how men and women perceive this behavior.
The perception gap is enormous and deeply consequential. When researchers asked individuals about a partner's regular porn use, 61% of men stated that it was actually a positive experience for them.
They viewed it as a net positive.
But in stark contrast, 51% of women stated that their partner's porn use was a negative experience. Only 22% of women found it to be positive.
What explains that massive disconnect? I mean, is it simply because men and women are socialized to view sexuality differently, or is there something deeper in the psychology of how we process threat and intimacy?
The experts in the report suggest a synthesis of several factors. Historically, as we discussed, explicit content has been highly normalized for men.
Often with their first exposure happening at a very young, formative age.
Right. Because of this deep normalization, men may view a female partner's use as entirely non-threatening. They might perhaps even interpret it as a marker of a high libido that validates the sexual aspect of the relationship.
They see it as a compliment to the bedroom.
Exactly. But women, generally speaking, internalize their partner's use through an entirely different psychological lens. For many women, it is perceived as a direct threat to the security of the relationship.
It feels like competition.
Yes. It is seen as a breach of exclusivity and an attack on their own self-worth.
The numbers heavily support that interpretation. Women who have a partner who regularly uses explicit content are 3 times more likely than men in the exact same situation to report feeling like my partner has betrayed me.
3 times more likely.
They are significantly more likely to experience a sharp decline in self-esteem, to report feeling physically unattractive, and to feel the crushing weight of unrealistic physical or performative expectations being placed on them.
The pressure is immense.
It creates this profound tension where one partner thinks everything is fine and the other is drowning in isolation.
This brings us to one of the most vital psychological concepts outlined in the report. It is called betrayal trauma.
This changes everything about how we view the partner's experience.
It really does. This term was originally coined by psychologist Jennifer Freyd. Betrayal trauma occurs when a person or an institution that you depend on for your survival, safety, or well-being significantly violates your trust through deception.
It is a fundamental shattering of reality.
Because compulsive porn use is so heavily stigmatized, it is almost always accompanied by a complex web of lies, gaslighting, and hidden behavior.
Clearing the browser history, lying about finances, hiding secondary devices.
Exactly. When the partner eventually discovers the truth, and they almost always do, the discovery doesn't just hurt their feelings. It fundamentally shatters their reality.
Dr. Keffer's research on the physiological reality of this trauma is intense. She found that 76% of betrayed partners individuals who discovered their spouse was secretly using explicit content or acting out sexually behind their back exhibit clinical symptoms of PTSD.
76%.
We are not just talking about being sad or angry. We are talking about symptoms identical to those seen in soldiers returning from active combat zones.
The body keeps the score, as they say.
These partners experience profound shock, extreme anxiety, debilitating panic attacks, chronic sleeplessness, and physical ailments like heart palpitations and digestive issues.
That physiological response is crucial to understand. The text emphasizes that discovering a partner's hidden use is not equivalent to a marital disagreement about finances or chores.
It's not just a fight.
No, it is a neurological trauma event. The betrayed partner's brain is thrown into a state of hypervigilance. Their amygdala is constantly firing, scanning the environment for threats.
Because the one person they trusted most in the world, the person who was supposed to be their safe harbor, suddenly became the source of profound emotional danger.
The safe harbor became the storm.
If the brain is stuck in that fight or flight loop, how do couples even begin to find a path forward? Because the report doesn't just leave the reader sitting in the rubble, it offers a roadmap.
It provides very clear clinical direction.
We hear from experts like Dr. Barbara Steffens and Dr. Carol Sheets, along with Ernie and Jackie Chambers, a couple who survived severe betrayal trauma in their own marriage and now actively mentor others through the process.
The absolute ground floor for relational healing, according to the consensus of these experts, is rigorous, absolute honesty.
There can be no more trickle truth.
None. The betraying partner must commit to keeping zero secrets. Because deception is the primary precursor to the trauma, verifiable transparency is the only mechanism that can begin to rebuild safety in the betrayed partner's nervous system.
Jackie Chambers offers some incredibly practical, hard-won advice for the betrayed spouse. Her core message is that the betrayed partner has to prioritize their own healing first and foremost.
It is the classic airplane oxygen mask principle.
You have to secure your own mask before helping the person next to you. She specifically warns against the betrayed spouse falling into the trap of becoming their partner's accountability police.
This is a very common, very dangerous trap.
Trying to meticulously control or monitor the betraying spouse's recovery process, checking their phone every night, looking at router logs, it just locks the betrayed partner in that devastating state of hypervigilance.
It prevents their own nervous system from ever calming down.
Right, and which leads to long-term stress-related illnesses.
Instead of policing, she advises setting firm, non-negotiable boundaries and establishing regular, structured check-ins.
So what does a structured check-in look like?
It could be a dedicated 15 minutes every Wednesday night, where the betraying partner proactively shares how their recovery is going, any triggers they faced, and what steps they are taking.
So the burden of disclosure is on the person who caused the harm.
Exactly. This allows the betrayed spouse to know what is happening in the recovery process without having to carry the burden of constant surveillance.
And Ernie Chambers emphasizes the absolute necessity for the betrayer to step out of the shadows. They must embrace transparency, and they absolutely need a supportive, accountable community of other people in recovery to help them change their behavior.
The core message is that a person cannot overcome this level of neurological and behavioral conditioning in isolation.
That desperate need for community, guidance, and open conversation becomes especially urgent when we look at what is happening with the next generation.
The youth data is arguably the most concerning part of the entire report.
We are raising kids in what can only be described as a digital Wild West. When you look at modern youth culture, the report specifically references the explicit nature of the television show Euphoria and the cultural impact of artists like Billie Eilish. There is a complete systemic normalization of extreme and sometimes violent sexual behavior.
The traditional boundaries haven't just blurred for the youth, they have been completely eradicated.
It is just part of the water they swim in now.
The accessibility of extreme, hardcore content on devices they carry into their classrooms and bedrooms is unprecedented in human history. And we see this normalization manifesting directly in their interpersonal behavior.
The sexting statistics blew my mind.
The BARNA data highlights that 55% of young adults between the ages of 18 and 38 have sent a nude image of themselves.
Over half.
Furthermore, an incredible 74% have received one. Sexting is no longer a fringe, rebellious activity. It has become the standard, normalized protocol for digital courtship and dating.
It makes you stop and wonder, where are they actually learning the rules of engagement for all of this?
They're definitely not learning it from traditional sources.
The researchers surveyed youth leaders, and 89% of them said they desperately wish parents were the primary sex educators in kids' lives.
But the reality on the ground is entirely different.
Teens report that they are learning about sex from their peers. 69% say friends are their primary source. 69% also point to social media platforms.
TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat.
Right, and 56% admit they are learning about sex and intimacy directly from watching pornography.
This raises an incredibly important question about the psychological development of an entire generation. What happens to the human brain when an algorithm, which is optimized purely for extreme content and maximum engagement, becomes the primary sex educator?
It strips all the humanity out of it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, This unsupervised algorithmic education is actively training young people to view other human beings merely as objects for self-gratification.
It treats people like vending machines for pleasure.
Yes, it erodes impulse control. It fundamentally divorces sexual intimacy from emotional commitment, and it creates a neurological template where relationships are expected to be entirely self-focused, frictionless, and on-demand.
You swipe away a video you don't like, so you start expecting to swipe away a partner who requires work or patience.
Exactly. It completely undermines the resilience required for a real long-term human relationship.
But amidst all that concerning data, the youth leaders also shared what is actually moving the needle and helping teens who are already struggling with compulsive use.
The interventions that actually work.
And the answer is not just installing better blocking software on their phones or giving them a stern lecture about consequences.
Tech solutions can only go so far against tech problems.
The interventions that actually work are deeply relational. 55% of leaders said personal professional counseling was highly effective, and 54% pointed to the impact of one-on-one mentors.
It takes a physical, invested human connection to pull a young person out of that digital isolation.
Which brings us to the core of the recovery principles outlined in the Beyond the Porn Phenomenon report. This is where we transition from understanding the problem to outlining the solution.
This is the most important part of the entire deep dive.
Whether we are discussing teenagers, adults, or couples navigating betrayal trauma, overcoming this behavioral loop requires a systematic, community-driven approach.
But before any of those systems can be put into place, the experts insist we must first dispel a very dangerous, universally held myth.
The willpower myth. This is such a crucial point. The BARNA data shows that 66% of U.S. adults genuinely believe a person can overcome a porn addiction relying on willpower alone.
2/3 of the country thinks you can just white-knuckle it.
The cultural narrative is just grit your teeth, make a better choice, and try harder. It's like telling someone they can stare down a chocolate cake at 11 p.m. after the most stressful day of their life every single night and never take a bite.
The brain is going to demand relief.
Willpower is a finite resource. By the end of the day, your decision fatigue is high, and eventually, the brain's demand for relief is going to win.
The experts in the report, including Crystal Renaud-Day and clinical psychologist Dr. Julie Slattery, explain exactly why willpower will always eventually fail.
It is not a moral failing, it is a biological reality.
They classify compulsive pornography use not just as a bad habit, but as an intimacy disorder.
An intimacy disorder that changes the entire framework.
It is a visible symptom of a much deeper, unmet need for connection, belonging, or emotional regulation. Believing that you can beat a deeply ingrained neurochemical intimacy disorder with mere willpower is often a defense mechanism.
It is a way to avoid asking for help.
It is rooted in denial and shame. It keeps the individual isolated, convincing them they just need to be stronger, which is exactly the environment where the addiction continues to thrive.
That isolation is quantified in the report as the secrecy epidemic. A staggering 84% of users report they have absolutely no one helping them avoid the behavior.
84% are completely alone in this.
Let that sink in. Half of all users say that literally no one in their entire life even knows about their struggle. They are carrying this massive, shame-inducing secret completely alone.
But here's the pivot, and this is where the hope in the data becomes actionable. When users do have someone helping them, whether that is an accountability partner, a professional counselor, or a support group, they are significantly less likely to report frequent, daily, or weekly usage.
Accountability works.
Bringing the hidden behavior out of the dark and into the light drastically diminishes its power over the individual.
So let's translate all of this theory into an incredibly practical action plan. Based on the expert analysis in this comprehensive report, what is the exact step-by-step system to actually quit?
We need to break down the actual daily mechanics of recovery.
How do we take this clinical advice and turn it into daily habits and concrete relapse prevention techniques?
The source material synthesizes the advice of these recovery experts into 4 primary pillars for effective long-term recovery.
Okay, let's walk through these pillars one by one.
The first pillar is therapy and counseling. This ranks as the #1 most effective treatment cited by both users and non-users in the survey, with 56% agreement.
Why is a therapist so crucial compared to just talking to a friend?
A trained therapist provides a crucial, shame-free environment to dig into the root causes. They address the underlying trauma, the rejection, the chronic anxiety, and the stress that are driving the behavior.
They're all looking at the roots, not just the branches.
Exactly. Rather than just trying to modify the behavioral fruit on the surface, they help the person understand why they are medicating in the first place.
Because if you don't heal the underlying trauma, if you don't figure out why the house is on fire in the first place, putting out the flames in one room just means the fire will inevitably pop up in another.
You might stop using explicit content, but you'll start drinking or overworking or gambling.
The brain will eventually seek out a numbing agent again. What is the second pillar of the system?
The second pillar is addiction recovery resources and groups. The text specifically highlights models like the 12-step programs pioneered by Alcoholics Anonymous, tailored specifically for sexual addiction.
So, getting into a room with other people who are facing the exact same battle.
Structured recovery groups provide necessary physical solidarity. When an individual sits in a room and hears someone else share an identical story of failure, shame, and struggle, it actively dismantles the toxic internal belief of, I am uniquely broken.
Or I am damaged goods.
It replaces crippling shame with shared humanity. You realize you are not a monster, you are just a human being struggling with a very common, very human biological hijack.
You heal in community, not in isolation. That makes total sense. What does the third pillar involve?
The third pillar focuses on absolute honesty and transparency. For the individual struggling, this translates into setting up trustworthy accountability partners and establishing rigorous daily habits.
Let's talk about those daily habits. What does a Tuesday look like for someone actively working this plan?
This means actively checking in with a sponsor or a partner every single day and learning to articulate when you are feeling triggered before you actually act out.
So it's proactive, not reactive.
Yes, it involves recognizing the HLAT triggers.
HLT, H-A-L-T. Break that down for us.
It stands for hungry, angry, lonely, or tired.
Okay, so basic human vulnerabilities.
Exactly. The report emphasizes that most relapses don't happen because someone is just overwhelmingly horny. They happen because it is 10 p.m., the person is exhausted from work tired.
Or they just had a massive fight with their spouse angry.
Or they are sitting alone in a hotel room on a business trip lonely. Recognizing those HLE triggers and vocalizing those vulnerabilities before they turn into a relapse is a core daily habit.
So instead of opening a browser when you feel lonely, you call your sponsor and say, hey, I'm sitting in this hotel room, I feel isolated, and my brain is looking for a hit of dopamine.
That is exactly how you rewire the neural pathway. You seek genuine human connection instead of a digital substitute. It is about being honest about setbacks without the paralyzing fear of being cast out.
It requires fundamentally dismantling the architecture of lies and secrecy that protect the addiction.
And it leads right into relapse prevention. Part of the transparency pillar is having a concrete plan for when the urge hits.
What are the specific strategies for handling those intense urges?
The experts recommend creating physical friction. If the urge hits, you physically leave the room. You leave your phone on the kitchen counter and go for a walk.
You break the physical proximity to the device.
Yes. You practice box breathing to calm the nervous system down from that fight or flight craving state, and you immediately reach out to your support network.
And the fourth pillar is aimed directly at the surrounding community, specifically the church, given the faith-based nature of this report.
The community at large has to learn how to act as competent first responders.
Right. When a couple is dealing with the fallout of betrayal trauma, or an individual finally summons the courage to confess a struggle, the community must respond with informed empathy, not reactionary judgment.
If the first response is shock or disgust, that person is going right back into hiding.
Practically, acting as a first responder means providing tangible help. It looks like bringing meals or offering childcare for a couple in crisis. It means listening to the pain without spiritualizing it away.
Avoiding what the experts call spiritual bypass.
Let's define spiritual bypass for a second, because that is a massive hurdle in religious communities. It's essentially slapping a quick Bible verse or a theological cliche onto a deep psychological bullet wound, right?
That is a perfect description.
It's telling a betrayed spouse they just need to pray more and forgive immediately to rush the healing process, which completely invalidates the actual neurological trauma they're experiencing.
That is exactly what it is, and it causes immense secondary damage. The community must avoid that bypass at all costs.
You cannot pray away PTSD.
You cannot. And crucially, acting as a first responder means knowing your limits. It means the community must be willing and prepared to refer individuals to specialized, clinically trained trauma therapists rather than trying to handle complex neurobiological and psychological issues internally with just good intentions.
Good intentions don't rewire trauma. To bring all of these complex threads together, the text offers an incredibly helpful, accessible analogy.
The junk food analogy.
Yes, society currently treats explicit content a bit like junk food. On a broad cultural level, we generally know it has negative societal effects.
We know it's not particularly good for us or our relationships.
But its extreme accessibility, its affordability, given that it is almost entirely free, and the massive, reliable dopamine hit it provides keep us constantly coming back to the drive-thru.
It's an apt analogy that perfectly illustrates the environment we live in. Overcoming this behavior requires a conscious, communal, and highly structured dietary shift.
You have to change how you consume everything.
You cannot simply wish away a junk food addiction. If you live in a house where the pantry is overflowing with it, your friends are constantly eating it, and you don't have any healthy coping mechanisms for when you get stressed.
You need a comprehensive plan to manage the urges.
You need to understand the underlying emotional triggers that make you crave the dopamine hit in the first place, and you need a robust support system to help you make fundamentally different choices when those cravings inevitably hit.
So let's synthesize everything we have unpacked from this report today. The data is clear. Pornography is no longer a fringe issue happening in the shadows.
It is entirely mainstream.
It is a pervasive, highly engineered phenomenon that is actively rewriting the neurological and relational wiring of millions of people across every demographic, every age group, and every belief system.
The psychological hook is universal.
Whether you are dealing with this personally and trying to find a way out, whether you are supporting a partner through the devastating physiological realities of betrayal trauma, or whether you are a parent just trying to raise healthy kids in an unregulated digital Wild West.
The core message of the Beyond the Porn Phenomenon report is a message of hope grounded in reality.
Isolation and shame are the enemies. They fuel the cycle. Radical honesty, professional trauma-informed therapy, and safe, empathetic communities are the cure.
Engaging with this data is incredibly empowering. It equips you with the empathy necessary to support friends who might be struggling in profound silence.
It gives you the clinical vocabulary to protect your own relationships and set healthy, firm boundaries.
And perhaps most importantly, it gives you the knowledge to look at the digital world and the algorithms that push content toward you, with your eyes wide open to their actual design.
We hope this deep dive has given you some clarity, some vocabulary, and some actionable steps regarding an issue that thrives almost entirely in the dark.
And to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day, consider the architecture of the digital world we all inhabit.
It's a system designed to keep us scrolling.
If an algorithm designed purely by tech companies to maximize profit and perfectly hijack your brain's evolutionary dopamine system is actively shaping your neurological template for love, arousal, and intimacy.
Who is actually in control?
Who is actually writing the story of your most intimate relationships, you or the screen?
That is a question we all need to ask ourselves. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Keep questioning the systems around you, keep looking for the truth beneath the surface, and we will catch you next time.